struggling waitress paid for a family's meal when their card declined. Then a millionaire showed up. They say every stranger you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, and few battlegrounds are as chaotic as a busy diner on a Saturday night. On this particular evening, a young waitress named Alexis Porter was carrying more than trays of hot plates. She was juggling dreams, heartbreaks, and a desire to help others despite her own financial struggles. When a desperate family's credit card declined, she made a choice that would change her life forever. Little did she know that her simple act of kindness would set in motion a chain of extraordinary events, and a millionaire's fateful appearance. Alexis Porter had not been working at Magnolia Diner for very long, 2 months. In fact, but it felt like a lifetime. Every day she woke up at 5 in the morning, got herself ready in her cramped studio apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, and hopped on the local bus to the diner. At 24, she felt both too young and too old to be living this life of perpetual financial anxiety. Yet she pressed on, fueled by an indefatigable sense of determination and, most importantly, love for her mother, who relied on Alexis's income for medication and rent. The routine never wavered: greet the early morning regulars, refill coffee mugs with a bright, albeit tired, smile, and handle table after table until the final shift ended. The manager, Margaret Keller, a stern woman in her late 50s, had little patience for tardiness or personal drama. She had seen far too many servers come and go, each with their own sob story. Margaret wanted results, not excuses, which only added to the pressure Alexis felt each time she clocked in. Despite the stress, Alexis had grown quite attached to the diner. Tucked between a hardware store and a nail salon off Maple Street, Magnolia Diner was a local fixture. Its faded neon sign flickered every evening, and the windows displayed hand-painted pictures of milkshakes and burgers. Regulars like Mr. Donovan, a retired bus driver, or Tasha, a harried single mum who brought her 2-year-old son in for breakfast, became the comforting constant in her otherwise unpredictable life. She found solace in serving others, even when her own pockets were nearly empty. That night, one fateful Saturday, began like any other. She donned her navy blue uniform and pinned her name tag just below her left shoulder. She double-checked her reflection in the streaky bathroom mirror before heading out for her shift. As she slung her worn-out purse over her shoulder, she reminded herself, "This is temporary. Keep going." She couldn't possibly imagine how the next few hours would unravel, setting her on a collision course with destiny, heartbreak, and unforeseen hope. The dinner rush at Magnolia Diner typically started around 6 p.m. and ended well after 10 p.m., leaving the staff in a perpetual scramble to seat customers, take orders, and juggle the phone calls for takeouts. That evening was even busier than usual. A local basketball game had just ended, sending waves of hungry fans flooding into the small diner. Alexis, short on help because one of the other servers had called out sick, was racing between tables, balancing 3 large trays of burgers, fries, and milkshakes in a precarious dance. She had just about found her rhythm when she noticed a family of 4 walking in, parents with 2 children, eyes brimming with anticipation for a good meal. The father, Robert Johnson, was tall and visibly anxious, frequently checking his phone. The mother, Patricia, held the hand of her youngest daughter, Lily, who looked no older than 6. The older son, Max, was probably around 10, sporting a T-shirt of a popular cartoon character. They were shown to a booth in Alexis's section. From the moment Alexis greeted them, she sensed their tension. The father's smile was polite but strained. The mother held back tears. The children, though hungry, seemed subdued. She noticed Max tapping his foot nervously, while Lily stared quietly at her empty plate. Alexis poured water for them and introduced the specials, making sure to sound as enthusiastic as possible despite the swirling chaos around her. When Alexis returned with their food, she saw that Patricia was quietly crying. Robert had his arm around her, whispering assurances. Alexis, concerned, placed the plates gently in front of them, asked if everything was okay, and offered extra napkins. Patricia wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. She told Alexis they were just tired from a tough week. Alexis didn't pry. Instead, she resolved to make their dining experience as comforting as possible. As Alexis was about to drop off their check, the father asked if they could have one more soda refill for the kids. She obliged, returning moments later with 2 fresh colas. That was when everything took a dramatic turn. Robert handed Alexis a credit card, his face tense, but he tried to appear collected. Alexis swiped the card at the counter, only to see the machine spit out the word "declined" in bold letters. She tried it again, declined once more. Alarmed, she approached the table and explained the situation quietly. Robert's eyes widened in panic. Patricia's face turned ashen. The kids looked back and forth between their parents and Alexis, not fully understanding the severity of what was happening. Robert frantically rummaged through his wallet, pulling out a second card. Declined. A third card. Declined. Patricia fished around in her purse for a few crumpled bills, but it was nowhere near enough to cover the meal. The rest of the diner bustled with life, no one noticing the quiet catastrophe unfolding in Alexis's section. Robert began apologizing profusely, explaining that he had recently lost his job and their finances were a wreck. They hadn't realized their available funds were so low. They had simply wanted a small treat for the kids after a difficult week. Humiliation and desperation colored every word he uttered. Patricia sank lower into the booth, her cheeks blazing with shame, tears threatening to spill. Caught between sympathy and the strict rules of the diner, Alexis glanced toward the manager's station. Margaret was busy dealing with another minor crisis and wouldn't be sympathetic if a table simply walked out on the check. This family was on the verge of being humiliated in front of the entire diner unless somebody intervened. Alexis took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest, and made a split-second decision that would forever change her life. Despite her own financial strains, Alexis knew what it felt like to be in a desperate situation. She thought of her mother, Linda Porter, who had been in and out of the hospital. She remembered the humiliation of being unable to afford medication or rent. Compassion welled up inside her. Without second-guessing, she calmly told Robert and Patricia to wait. She walked over to the register and reached for her own bank card. She paid for their meal, tip included, and quietly slipped the receipt into her apron pocket. She went back to the booth, trying to maintain her composure. "It's been taken care of," she said gently. Robert's eyes widened, and Patricia immediately protested, insisting they would find a way to pay. But Alexis shook her head, offering a reassuring smile. She explained that it was a gift she simply wanted to help. The children's faces lit up with gratitude, though they still sensed the tension in the air. Robert placed his hand over his heart, overwhelmed. Patricia broke into tears again, but this time they were tears of relief and immense gratitude. Alexis wanted to leave them with their dignity intact, so she minimized the significance of what she'd done. "It happens," she said with a small shrug, "and I'm sure you'll pay it forward when you can." She walked away before they could protest further. She knew how humiliating it felt to be on the receiving end of pity. Her aim was not to shame them, but to ensure they left the diner with hope instead of despair. When the family was ready to leave, Robert approached her at the server's station near the back. With a trembling hand, he offered to write down their phone number, promising to pay her back as soon as he got his next paycheck. Alexis smiled politely, tucking the small piece of paper into her pocket. She knew how uncertain financial situations could be, and she had no expectations that they might actually repay her. Nevertheless, she accepted the phone number graciously. With tearful eyes, Patricia mouthed, "Thank you again." The children waved shyly. And just like that, they were gone, leaving Alexis with a strange mix of warmth in her chest and a sinking feeling in her stomach, wondering how she would make up for that expense in her own budget. Alexis's short-lived relief evaporated the moment she encountered Margaret Keller's piercing gaze. Word had travelled fast among the staff. Donna, the cashier, who often had little tolerance for any breaks from protocol, had spotted Alexis covering the Johnson family's bill. In the diner's hierarchy, generosity on the clock wasn't exactly praised, especially if it was perceived as overshadowing management or creating any future expectation among customers that they could forgo payment. Margaret cornered Alexis in the staff break area, arms folded over her starched blouse. "Did you just pay for that table out of your own pocket?" she demanded, her voice low but tense. Alexis swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. She saw no point in lying. "Yes, Margaret, I did." Their card declined, and they had no way to cover the bill. I couldn't bear to see them leave embarrassed. Margaret shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You know we have a policy about these situations, right? You should have come to me. We could have handled it differently. We can't just make a habit of giving out free meals." A wave of humiliation passed through Alexis. "I understand," she managed, "but I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because they needed help." Margaret let out an exasperated sigh. "Well, your intentions might be good, but the owners won't approve. You're here to earn money, not spend it on customers." She paused, as if assessing Alexis's reaction. "Don't do it again." Though the reprimand was gentler than she'd feared, it still stung. Alexis nodded meekly, then went back to tending her tables. The rest of her shift moved at a snail's pace, her mind replaying the confrontation and the worried faces of the Johnson family. She wondered if they felt better now, or if their financial troubles would persist. A sense of uncertainty accompanied her like a shadow. Midnight found Alexis dragging her feet to the last bus that would take her back to her tiny apartment. Exhaustion clouded her thoughts. She barely managed to open the front door without dropping her keys. Inside, the cramped living room doubled as her bedroom. She had a single, worn-out couch that folded out into a makeshift bed, a chipped wooden coffee table, and a flickering lamp that had once belonged to her grandmother. The place smelled faintly of instant noodles and stale coffee. Her phone buzzed a text from her mother, Linda, who lived in a nearby seniors' residence due to her medical needs. "Any updates on that extra shift?" Alexis sighed. She texted back an apology that she'd only managed to snag a couple more hours this week. Nothing major. She glanced at her bank balance. Covering the Johnson family's meal had set her back more than she'd anticipated. She had exactly $32.70 left until payday, which was still 5 days away. She had groceries for maybe 2 days, and her rent was overdue. Her mother needed new medication by next week. Despite the financial crunch, Alexis couldn't muster a single ounce of regret for what she'd done. She changed into an old t-shirt, rubbed her sore feet, and heated up a cup of instant noodles for dinner. As she waited for the microwave to ding, she dug out the small slip of paper Robert Johnson had given her. Scribbled in neat handwriting was his phone number and the words, "We will never forget your kindness." She found herself smiling sadly. The exhaustion on his face, the silent tears of Patricia, and the hopeful eyes of their children haunted her. She figured any one of her customers could be just a paycheck away from crisis, just like she was. With that sobering thought, she finished her noodles and collapsed onto the couch bed. Sleep claimed her quickly, yet her dreams were fragmented visions of unstoppable bills, heartbreak, and fleeting glimpses of a future she couldn't quite touch. The following day was her one day off. Alexis wanted nothing more than to sleep in, but the loud banging on her door at 9 a.m. put an end to that. She stumbled to open it, expecting maybe the mailman or a neighbor with a complaint, only to find her friend and co-worker Tanya, nearly bursting with excitement. "Have you seen it?" Tanya asked, waving her phone as though it were a golden ticket. "Seen what?" Alexis blinked, half asleep. "This!" Tanya shoved the phone into Alexis's hand. A local community Facebook group page was open, showing a post from Patricia Johnson, accompanied by a photo of Magnolia Diner's exterior. The post read, "I want to thank the kind-hearted waitress who paid for my family's meal when our card was declined last night. Her name is Alexis Porter, and she deserves the world. If anyone knows her, please help me reach out to her so we can repay her kindness." Below the post, hundreds of likes and comments poured in. People praised Alexis as an angel, a hero, a symbol of goodness in a harsh world. Several offered to donate money to the family or to Alexis herself. There was talk of local news channels wanting to do a segment about the story. Alexis's eyes widened. She wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or horrified. "Oh my God," she whispered. She had never asked for recognition. She only wanted to help a struggling family in a moment of crisis. Now, her phone was buzzing non-stop with friend requests and messages from total strangers. Tanya, her grin radiant, squeezed Alexis's hand. "You're famous." She paused. "Well, at least in Hartford." "This is going to blow up, girl." But Alexis couldn't quite share her friend's enthusiasm. The diner's manager, Margaret, had already been critical about her generosity. If this local buzz morphed into a full-scale media spotlight, Alexis worried she might face more backlash at work or, worse yet, lose her job. Nevertheless, she couldn't deny a small spark of excitement at being recognized for doing something she believed in. Maybe, just maybe, some good could come out of this after all. On Monday morning, Alexis arrived for her shift with a knot in her stomach. Over the past day, the social media post had gained traction, with many in the community praising her. Some even called the diner, wanting to speak with her directly. She dreaded facing Margaret Keller, certain her manager would frown upon all the attention. The moment Alexis walked in, she felt the stares of her co-workers, some admiring, some perhaps envious, and a few uncertain about how to react. As she placed her purse in her locker, Donna from the cashier's station gave her a sympathetic look, saying, "Margaret wants to see you in her office right away." Alexis's heart hammered in her chest as she made her way to the cramped, windowless manager's office. Margaret was sitting behind a small metal desk, littered with receipts, schedules, and memos. She gestured for Alexis to close the door. "I suppose you know why I called you in," Margaret began, folding her hands in front of her. Her expression wasn't unkind, but it wasn't friendly either. "We're getting a lot of calls about you, local news reporters, customers, random people. They're all praising you for covering that family's meal." Alexis swallowed. "Yes, ma'am, I've heard." Margaret arched an eyebrow. "I'm not going to chastise you again for what you did. But you need to understand, we can't allow the diner to be perceived as a charity. It could set a precedent that some might try to exploit." She paused, then sighed. "That said, the attention could be good for business if handled correctly. The owners are actually curious to see if this might boost our reputation." A flicker of relief crossed Alexis's face. "So, you're not mad?" Margaret shook her head. "Not as mad as I was. But watch your step. This could go either way. If the attention gets out of hand, or if people start expecting free meals, we'll have problems. Understood?" Alexis nodded solemnly. She left the office feeling cautious optimism. Perhaps she wouldn't lose her job after all. She tucked her apron around her waist and got to work, feeling a surge of confidence. She served customers with a renewed sense of purpose. As she passed by Donna at the register, she noticed a stack of local newspapers on the counter. Her eyes landed on a small article headline, "Local Waitress's Act of Kindness Goes Viral." Her cheeks flushed. Was this really her life now? As the morning rush subsided, Alexis found herself refilling the salt and pepper shakers at the back counter. She was lost in thought, replaying the last few days, when the bell above the diner door tinkled. In walked a tall man, mid-40s perhaps, wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit. He surveyed the interior of Magnolia Diner with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The hostess, a teenage girl working her after-school job, seated him in Alexis's section. Adjusting her apron, Alexis approached, not recognizing him as one of the regulars. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you a cup of coffee or anything else to start with?" The man whose name Alexis would soon discover was David Thompson looked up with a warm smile. "Coffee, black, please. And I'm actually here looking for someone. Are you Alexis Porter?" Surprised, Alexis nodded. "Yes, I am. May I help you?" David extended his hand. "David Thompson. I'm an investor and philanthropist, here in Hartford for some business meetings. I couldn't help but hear about your story. If you have a moment, I'd love to talk." Despite her curiosity, Alexis felt a hint of apprehension. People had been asking to speak with her all week, but none had worn a suit that practically screamed money. "Sure," she replied hesitantly. "Once I get these orders out, I can spare a minute." David nodded, understanding. "Take your time. I'm in no rush." Alexis quickly attended to her other tables, her mind racing with possibilities. Why would an investor want to talk to her? She had grown accustomed to well-wishers or local reporters seeking a human interest story, but something in David's demeanor suggested a different motive. Nevertheless, she resolved to stay professional and polite, no matter what. After serving 2 more tables their breakfasts, she returned to David Thompson, poured him a refill of coffee, and asked if he was ready to order. "Just the coffee for now," he said. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "I've been following your story on social media and in the local press." A friend of mine, Robert Jacobson, also from Hartford, mentioned it. "Your gesture touched me deeply." Alexis offered a polite smile. "I'm flattered, but I really didn't expect any of this." "I can tell," David replied, "which is precisely why I wanted to meet you. Sometimes a small act of kindness can have ripple effects you don't anticipate. I'd like to learn more about you, your goals, challenges, maybe ways I could help." Alexis's eyes widened, suspicion stirring. Too many times in her life, she'd learned that offers of help could come with strings attached. She parted her lips to respond, but a voice from another table called out for more coffee. Duty beckoned, so she excused herself, leaving David Thompson at the booth, sipping his coffee and gazing out the diner window as though he owned the world. When the lunch rush finally tapered, Alexis found a brief window of calm. She dropped onto the seat across from David Thompson, mentally bracing herself. "I've got a few minutes now," she offered. David nodded, setting aside his phone. Up close, Alexis noticed his salt and pepper hair and the fine lines around his eyes, signs of a life lived with intensity. But there was a gentleness to his manner. "I won't beat around the bush," he began. "I grew up in a poor neighborhood in Chicago. My single mother worked 2 jobs to put food on the table. If it weren't for the kindness of strangers and certain opportunities, I'd never have become who I am today. So when I read what you did for that family, I saw a reflection of the compassion I relied on when I was a child." Alexis blinked away the sudden sting of tears. She never intended to become a symbol of selflessness. She simply wanted to do the right thing. "I appreciate that," she managed quietly. David took a breath, as though weighing his words carefully. "I run a program that helps underprivileged young adults find better opportunities, vocational training, networking, scholarships. I invest in people, not just startups. If you're open to it, I'd like to offer you a chance to further your education or career prospects." The impact of his offer left Alexis speechless for a moment. She had always dreamed of going to culinary school, or maybe pursuing a degree in hospitality management. But money was always the barrier, and her mother's medical needs took precedence. "That sounds too good to be true," she admitted, her voice tinged with both hope and wariness. "Nothing is guaranteed," David conceded, "but I'd love to help you apply for a scholarship or connect you with resources. It won't be a handout. You'll have to work for it, but at least some of the financial burden might be lifted." Alexis swallowed hard. Doubt and excitement wrestled in her mind. She had a job, though not a high-paying one, and responsibilities. She had her mother to think about. But perhaps this was the opportunity she had long prayed for. "Could we talk more about the details?" "I'd need to think it through." "Of course." David handed her a business card, crisp white with embossed lettering. "Give me a call when you're off work, or whenever you're ready." There's no rush. His sincerity was disarming. Alexis took the card gently, reading the simple text: David Thompson, Thompson Innovations and Outreach. Beneath that were phone numbers and an email address. She slipped the card into her apron pocket as if it were a fragile treasure. Word got around fast that a wealthy man had shown interest in Alexis's future. Tanya, wide-eyed and brimming with enthusiasm, cornered Alexis by the soda fountain. Who was that? He looked so important, Alexis explained as best she could, though her own mind was still in a whirl. Rumors spread among the staff. Some congratulated her. Others whispered that she might be leaving the diner soon for bigger, better things. One co-worker joked, "Don't forget us little people when you're rich and famous." Alexis could only laugh nervously, unsure of what might actually transpire. Meanwhile, the local media outlets picked up on David Thompson's visit. A small online news site ran the headline, "Millionaire Investor Meets with Local Good Samaritan Waitress." Overnight, Alexis's personal life became even more of a public spectacle. She received friend requests from strangers across the state, and her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Not all the attention was positive. Several co-workers, especially those who had been at Magnolia Diner for years, questioned why Alexis was getting all this recognition for a gesture. They too had performed in smaller ways. Jealousy sprouted in corners of the diner, rumblings of she thinks she's special and she just wants the spotlight floated through the break room. Alexis tried to keep her head down and focus on her job, but the tension gnawed at her. She confided in Tanya, who offered unwavering support. "Don't worry about them," Tanya assured her. "They'll forget all this in a week, and you'll still have the chance to better your life. This is your moment, Alexis." But was it truly her moment, or simply another mirage? The next day, she found a note shoved under her door. It read, "If you're so kind, why not share the wealth? Stop playing hero." Alexis's heart sank. She wasn't wealthy, nor was she playing hero. She had barely enough to survive. The negativity felt like a heavy cloud overshadowing what should have been a hopeful time. Yet, every time doubt stirred, she remembered the relieved faces of Robert and Patricia Johnson, the promise of David Thompson's outreach program, and the supportive comments from the community. She had to believe that kindness still counted for something, that good deeds could indeed set a chain of blessings into motion. Amid the whirlwind, Alexis managed to find time to visit her mother, Linda Porter, at the seniors' residence. Tucked away at the edge of Hartford, the center housed many elderly individuals who needed daily medical support. Linda Porter, at age 65, battled recurring bouts of pneumonia and required a regimen of medication. Alexis felt guilt prickle at her heart each time she had to return her mother to the residence she wished she could afford in home care or a better facility. She arrived carrying a small bag of Linda's favorite pastries, fresh from the diner. Linda was dozing in a small armchair by the window, an old crocheted blanket over her lap. The stale smell of disinfectant and hospital-grade soap hung in the air. "Mum," Alexis called softly. Linda stirred, then opened her eyes. a gentle smile spreading across her weathered face. "Lexi, you're here, and you brought treats." They chatted for a bit about mundane details: Linda's physical therapy sessions, the resident cat that roamed the halls, the nurse who always hummed show tunes. Eventually, Alexis mustered the courage to mention the recent events. Carefully, she recounted how she had paid for a family's meal, the social media buzz, and finally, David Thompson's offer. Linda listened intently, her frail hand gripping her daughter's. When Alexis finished, her mother's eyes glistened. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "You always had a heart too big for this world. Now, it seems the world is paying you back." Alexis smiled, her heart warming. "I'm not sure what will come of it, but I'm scared and excited at the same time." "You should be," Linda replied gently, "but don't let fear hold you back. If this is a real chance to improve your life, you need to take it. Just promise me you won't abandon your old mama." She tried to laugh off her words, but the fear of being left behind lingered in her eyes. Alexis leaned in and hugged her mother. "Never. Whatever happens, you'll be the first I take care of." They shared a long moment, mother and daughter, both bound by love and the relentless struggles life had thrown their way. The next day brought an unexpected phone call. It was Robert Johnson, the father from the diner. His voice, still tinged with gratitude, resonated through Alexis's cell phone speaker. He apologized for the intrusion, but insisted that he and Patricia wanted to repay her, even if just partially, for covering their meal. They had scraped together some money after selling a few household items online. Alexis's initial reaction was to politely decline, but Robert's earnestness won her over. They arranged to meet at a local coffee shop that afternoon. When she arrived, she spotted them immediately: Robert, Patricia, and the children, Max and Lily, sitting at a small table. Lily waved excitedly, and Max tried to appear mature, though his bright grin gave him away. Patricia stood and embraced Alexis, tears in her eyes. "We haven't forgotten," she whispered. Robert handed her an envelope containing $40. It wasn't even half of what Alexis had paid, but the gesture was profound. Alexis could see the pride in Robert's eyes, the determination in Patricia's set jaw. They were doing everything they could to maintain dignity in a bleak financial landscape. Humbled, Alexis accepted the money. She had used her own tight funds to pay for their meal, yet something in her hesitated to take it back. She realized that sometimes people need to give back for the sake of their own self-respect. "Thank you," she said softly, "but your friendship is worth more than the money." Patricia insisted, "You'll always have a place with us if you ever need anything. Please know that." The children chimed in with their gratitude, with Lily drawing a crayon picture of a smiling waitress. "You're my hero." The child wrote in shaky handwriting. Alexis's heart brimmed with emotion. It reminded her that her small act of kindness had forged a bond more valuable than any dollar amount. 2 days later, Alexis mustered the courage to call David Thompson and accept his invitation to learn more about his program. They set up a meeting at a modest office space he had rented in Hartford. Alexis arrived dressed in her best outfit, a blouse and slacks she had purchased from a thrift store, determined to make a good impression. The office building was fairly nondescript from the outside, but upon entering, Alexis found bright, modern decor and a small staff bustling with purposeful energy. David greeted her warmly in the lobby and guided her to a glass-walled conference room. There, he introduced her to 2 key people in his team: Janet Holmes, a career counselor, and Marcus Lee, a financial advisor. They explained the fundamentals of David's outreach program, aptly named Second Chance Initiatives. The organization provided scholarships, mentorship, and job placement assistance to individuals who demonstrated both financial need and a track record of resilience and moral character. David's philanthropic arm was personally funded, meaning Alexis wouldn't be competing with hundreds of applicants for a small pot of money. Instead, David would invest in her future directly if the assessment proved it was a good match. Marcus spoke about forging a stable financial plan, paying off debts, building an emergency fund, and saving for further education. Janet outlined the potential educational pathways. Perhaps Alexis could attend a local community college for an associate degree in business or hospitality management. Alternatively, if she dreamed of culinary school, the program could help connect her with institutions in Connecticut or beyond. As the meeting progressed, Alexis felt hope blossom in her chest, but also a knot of anxiety. She was fiercely independent, often to a fault. Accepting help from strangers felt risky, like she was signing away her control. Yet, David and his team seemed genuine, their approach more collaborative than condescending. At the end, David clasped her hand. "No pressure," he said gently. "This opportunity is yours to consider. We believe in you, Alexis. Sometimes all a person needs is a small break to do something extraordinary." Alexis left the office with a folder of information and a head spinning with possibilities. For the first time in ages, her future felt open rather than suffocating. One might expect that a miraculous opportunity would usher in pure elation, but life rarely unfolds so simply. Alexis returned to the diner to find Margaret Keller frowning at her again. "I hear you're taking time off to pursue some fancy scholarship," Margaret said skeptically. The older woman's words dripped with a mix of envy and concern, as though she worried losing Alexis might strain their already short-staffed schedule. "I'm not sure yet," Alexis replied calmly, though her pulse raced. "I'm still exploring the options. If I do this, it won't be for a while. I need this job." Margaret gave a curt nod. "As long as you remember that you have responsibilities here, we can't hold a spot if you decide to drop everything and leave." Her implication was clear. If Alexis left for an extended period, she might not have a job waiting for her upon return. This conversation rattled Alexis. She couldn't afford to lose her job, not with her mother's medical bills. Yet if she let fear of the unknown dictate her decisions, she might be stuck as a struggling waitress indefinitely. She spent her next shift torn between excitement and dread. To complicate matters further, one of her co-workers, Casey, confronted her in the break room. "So you think you're better than us now, just because some rich guy showed up to reward your kindness?" Taken aback, Alexis responded quietly. "It's not like that at all. I never asked for any reward, I just—" "Save it," Casey snapped, storming out before Alexis could explain. The hostility weighed on her. Despite her best intentions, she was now alienating some colleagues. She tried to focus on the positive and remind herself that she had done nothing wrong. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was barreling forward on a runaway train, threatening to leave old relationships in the dust. Amid the chaos, another crisis emerged. Linda Porter was hospitalized again with respiratory complications. A nurse from the residence called Alexis during her shift at the diner. Terrified, Alexis rushed to Margaret, begging to leave early. Margaret hesitated, clearly annoyed at the inconvenience, but eventually relented. Alexis arrived at Hartford General Hospital in a tearful panic. She found Linda in a shared room, hooked to IVs and an oxygen machine. The clinical beeps of the monitors synchronized with Alexis's own frantic heartbeat. Linda offered a weak smile upon seeing her daughter. "Just another bump in the road," she wheezed, trying to maintain a brave face. A doctor explained that Linda's pneumonia had returned, aggravated by her weakened immune system. They planned to keep her for at least a week. Alexis sank into the bedside chair, overwhelmed by guilt. Why had she been focusing on her own future while her mother's health deteriorated? She held Linda's hand, tears sliding down her cheeks, promising she would make sure they'd get through this. Later, as Linda dozed off, Alexis sat in the hospital corridor, trying to steady her breathing. She noticed a row of pamphlets on financial aid for medical bills, hospice care, and elder support. The gloom of endless responsibilities pressed down upon her. She thought of David Thompson's offer. If she could secure a better paying job through education, she might afford better care for her mother. That possibility fed her determination, yet she worried about the time required. Her mother needed her now, not in 2 years or whenever she might graduate. That evening, Alexis returned to her apartment, physically and emotionally spent. She found Tanya waiting on the stoop, a worried expression etched across her face. "I heard about your mum," Tanya said softly. "How is she?" "Stable for now," Alexis replied, fumbling with her keys. She invited Tanya inside, and they sat down on the frayed couch. Alexis poured out her heart, her fears about losing her job, her hopes for a brighter future through David's program, her guilt over her mother's situation, and the negative backlash at the diner. Tanya listened patiently, nodding and offering the occasional reassuring pat on Alexis's knee. Eventually, Tanya cleared her throat. "I don't think you're doing anything wrong," she began gently. "You helped a family in need, and it opened a door for you. That's what good karma is all about, right?" Alexis grimaced. "But the timing is terrible. Mum's in the hospital. The manager's not happy. Some of my co-workers hate me. I'm stuck, Tanya." Tanya reached out and squeezed Alexis's hand. "Listen, I can't pretend to know all the answers, but I do know life rarely hands you perfect timing. Opportunities come when they come. If you pass on them out of fear, you may never see them again." Alexis leaned her head against the couch, tears rolling down her cheeks. She was grateful to have a friend like Tanya, yet the decisions looming over her felt colossal. She gazed at the battered coffee table, where David Thompson's folder of information lay. What if I fail? What if I can't keep up with the coursework? What if I have to quit my job and can't support Mum? Tanya gave her a resolute look. "Don't let what if rule your life. Think about how far you've come, Alexis. You're the bravest person I know. You'll figure it out." In that moment, Alexis felt a flicker of resolution. She hadn't fought tooth and nail all her life just to surrender to fear. She decided she would at least try to speak with David's team, try to form a plan that balanced her mother's needs, her job, and her future. The following day, Alexis found a moment to call David Thompson during her lunch break at the diner. She explained her mother's situation, her limited finances, and her fear of leaving her job. David listened intently, then suggested a compromise. Alexis could start with online courses or night classes to maintain her work schedule. The scholarship funds could help cover tuition and also assist with some of her mother's medical bills, provided Alexis maintained a certain GPA and remained actively engaged in the program. Intrigued, Alexis asked how soon she could enroll. David said they could expedite the process. Local community colleges often had rolling admissions, and the philanthropic arm was prepared to handle immediate expenses if necessary. This meant Alexis could potentially start classes within the month, as long as she completed the necessary paperwork and orientation. A spark of hope flickered through Alexis. She wasn't sure how she'd juggle everything full-time, waitressing, hospital visits, online classes, but at least she wouldn't have to abandon her income entirely. She resolved to speak with Margaret about adjusting her schedule, half dreading that conversation. That evening, she approached Margaret in the back office once again. To her surprise, Margaret's demeanor was less harsh. Perhaps she sensed the inevitability of Alexis's decision or recognized that a compromise would retain a reliable employee. "All right," Margaret said with a sigh. "I'll consider scheduling you in a way that lets you do these night classes. But if it starts to interfere with your performance here, we'll need to reassess." Relieved, Alexis thanked her profusely. Margaret raised a hand. "Don't thank me yet. We're still short-staffed, and you'll have to pull your weight." Her tone was clipped, but there was a glimmer of grudging respect in her eyes. Within a week, Alexis was accepted into a small, local community college's online program for hospitality management. The scholarship from David Thompson's Second Chance initiatives arrived like a miracle in her bank account, covering the initial course fees and providing a small stipend for textbooks. Alexis could hardly believe it as she ordered her books online, imagining a future where she might manage a restaurant or even open her own place someday. Despite the new excitement, her days turned grueling. She worked from early morning until late afternoon at the diner, took a brief break to visit her mother in the hospital, then spent her nights poring over online lectures and assignments. Sleep became a luxury. Yet, through it all, she felt an undercurrent of hope that had been absent for so long. Each small accomplishment, a passing quiz grade, a concept she mastered, reminded her that she was moving forward, even if the pace was slow. Her mother's condition stabilized, and Linda was eventually transferred back to the seniors' residence to recuperate. Buoyed by the knowledge that her mother was safe, Alexis threw herself fully into her new dual life, waitress by day, student by night. Tanya, always supportive, would sometimes pop by the apartment with homemade meals or help Alexis study. Meanwhile, local curiosity about her second chance story died down somewhat, allowing her a semblance of normalcy. But destiny had yet another twist in store, one that would challenge Alexis to her core. One bleak Wednesday, around closing time, the lights flickered at Magnolia Diner. A thunderstorm raged outside, sending sheets of rain pounding against the windows. Only a few straggling customers remained, sipping their coffees and waiting out the storm. Margaret had left early, leaving Alexis in charge of locking up once everyone was gone. Just as Alexis was wiping the last table, two men in hooded jackets burst through the door. At first, she assumed they were seeking shelter from the storm, but their furtive glances and tense body language suggested a more sinister intention. One of them approached the register, while the other scanned the nearly empty diner. Alexis felt her pulse spike. Tanya and Donna were in the kitchen, oblivious. "Good evening, sirs," Alexis said carefully, trying to maintain composure. "We're about to close, but if you need—" "Open the register," the taller man hissed, cutting her off. His hand rested under his jacket, implying he might be armed. Fear stabbed through Alexis. Her eyes darted toward the lone customer near the corner booth, who was now alert, eyes wide with apprehension. She also remembered Tanya and Donna in the back. Taking a slow breath, Alexis raised her hands. "Okay, let me get the register." Heart pounding, she moved behind the counter. Her mind raced. Should she try to press the silent alarm beneath the counter, or would that risk setting these men off? She glanced at the older man sipping coffee in the corner. He nodded almost imperceptibly, his gaze flicking to the phone near him. Maybe he was planning to call the police. Shaking, Alexis opened the register. "Take it," she whispered, stepping aside. The second man grabbed fistfuls of cash, stuffing them into a bag. Time slowed. Alexis worried about Tanya or Donna wandering in and startling these men, or the terrified customer trying something heroic. She prayed everyone would just remain still, that no one would get hurt. The entire robbery took less than 2 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. Then, as swiftly as they appeared, the men sprinted out into the downpour. Alexis sank to her knees, trembling with adrenaline and fear. The customer ran to lock the door after them, and Tanya emerged from the kitchen, eyes wide with horror. Donna, already on the phone with 911, stammered out details. The police arrived within minutes, lights flashing in the stormy night. Alexis gave her statement, describing the men as best she could: medium build, hooded jackets, possibly armed. The diner's security cameras were outdated, offering only grainy footage, but hopefully enough to aid the investigation. Margaret, having been notified, arrived in a flurry of anger and anxiety. She glared at Alexis as though the robbery was her fault. Tanya tried to intervene, explaining that Alexis had done everything right. She cooperated, kept calm, and prevented anyone from getting hurt. Eventually, Margaret's anger shifted to relief that no one was injured, yet the diner had lost a significant amount of money. The owners were furious. Insurance would cover some of it, but they threatened new security measures, pay cuts, or staff layoffs if robberies became a recurring issue. Alexis went home that night, drenched from the storm and haunted by what-if scenarios. She couldn't sleep, replaying the robbery in her head. She felt deeply shaken, her sense of security shattered. The once familiar diner now felt like a place of lingering dread. Still, she clung to the knowledge that no one was harmed. In a way, it reminded her how fragile life and livelihoods could be. News of the robbery spread through the local community. People rallied around Magnolia Diner with supportive messages and a spike in patronage, determined not to let crime intimidate their beloved local eatery. Some even set up a small fundraiser to help offset the losses. Alexis, however, couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that clung to her. David Thompson, upon hearing the news, called to check on her. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," he said, his voice sincere with concern. "If there's anything you need counseling, a break, or a safer job, let me know." Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected him to care that much after all. She was just one person in his outreach program. "I appreciate it," she whispered, surprising herself with how raw her emotions still were. "But I'm all right. I'll soldier on." She pushed forward, but a lingering fear settled in her bones each time she walked to the bus stop late at night or closed up the diner. Yet, ironically, this renewed her motivation to finish her courses. She dreamt of a day when she wouldn't have to worry about working nights in a place susceptible to robbery. The taste of ambition, once overshadowed by fear, now drove her relentlessly. Over the next few weeks, Alexis juggled more than ever her mother's medical appointments, night classes, and the constant stress at work. Margaret's watchful eye scrutinized her every move. The diner remained busier than usual, partly due to the public sympathizing with their recent misfortune, and partly because rumor had it that Alexis, the Good Samaritan waitress, still worked there. Robert and Patricia Johnson visited one afternoon, quietly sliding into a booth to share coffee. They asked how she was faring, offering moral support, and telling her about Robert's new part-time job. Hearing that their situation was improving lifted Alexis's spirits, a reminder that acts of kindness can sow seeds of resilience in others too. Still, the daily grind wore on her. Her sleep was minimal, her nerves often frayed. She found less time to indulge in any semblance of a social life, turning down Tanya's invitations to movies or weekend outings. All her energy went into surviving, improving, and not letting anyone down. One crisp Friday evening, tensions at the diner boiled over. A staff shortage left Alexis running double-duty waiting tables and helping Donna at the register. Frustration built among the customers, who faced longer wait times. Casey, the co-worker who had sneered at Alexis's hero act, snapped at her in front of customers for being slow. Alexis, frazzled, snapped back. The argument escalated right in the middle of the diner. Both women spat angry words, each accusing the other of arrogance or laziness. Margaret intervened, barking at them to take it to the back if they needed to talk. Furious, Alexis and Casey stormed into the kitchen, ignoring the curious stares of patrons. "You think you're so special?" Casey hissed, cornering Alexis near the dishwashing station. "You're the reason we're short-staffed. Everyone thinks you're next to leave, so they left first. And now we're drowning in extra shifts." "That's not my fault," Alexis retorted, tears of anger welling in her eyes. "I never asked for the attention, never asked for a robber to walk in. I'm just trying to survive and help my mother." Casey's face contorted with rage, but there was a flicker of shame in her eyes. She opened her mouth to retort, but Tanya rushed in, stepping between them. "Enough!" Tanya demanded, her voice shaking. "We're all under stress, but this isn't helping." Casey glared at both of them, then stomped off. Alexis stood trembling, tears threatening to spill. Tanya placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Ignore her. She's projecting her problems onto you. Focus on your own path." Alexis nodded, breathing hard. Exhaustion and frustration had cracked her composure. She dabbed her eyes, then returned to the floor, trying to salvage her shift. That night, she went home with a churning stomach, doubting whether she could keep juggling so much chaos. Weeks became months, and Alexis pressed on with her online classes. Some nights, she dozed off at her laptop, only to wake with a jolt, forcing herself to finish an assignment. Her academic advisor praised her diligence, remarking that she was on track to finish her first semester successfully. The second semester would start soon after, paving the way to a certificate in hospitality management. David Thompson checked in periodically, offering encouragement and even introducing Alexis to some local restaurant owners who could potentially offer a better-paying position once she completed her courses. Though grateful, Alexis felt she couldn't leave Magnolia Diner quite yet. The flexible schedule was vital to her balancing act, and part of her felt a strange loyalty to the place. One chilly Sunday, Alexis submitted her final assignments for the semester. A wave of relief and pride swept over her. She had completed a chunk of higher education while managing a chaotic life. Though not a full graduation, it felt like a milestone. She celebrated quietly at home with Tanya, sharing cheap takeout and a heartfelt toast of ginger ale. The next morning brought an email from Janet Holmes, David's career counselor. "Congratulations on finishing your first semester, Alexis. Let's discuss next steps soon." Reading those words, Alexis felt a glimmer of excitement for the path ahead. A few days later, David Thompson visited Magnolia Diner once again. He arrived unannounced, taking a seat at one of the booths near the back. Alexis almost dropped the coffee pot when she recognized him. She rushed over. "David!" "What a surprise. Everything okay?" He smiled. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I came to give you an update on some new opportunities." They agreed to talk after her shift, so David patiently sipped coffee and typed away on his laptop while Alexis tended to the bustling lunch crowd. She couldn't help but notice curious glances from her co-workers, especially Casey, who muttered something under her breath. Alexis shrugged it off, focusing on the tasks at hand. Finally, as the crowd thinned, Alexis joined David in his booth. The diner had quieted, offering a rare lull. David closed his laptop, turning his attention fully to her. "I've been following your academic progress, and I'm truly impressed," he began warmly. "But I'm not here to simply congratulate you. I have a proposition." Alexis leaned forward. "I'm listening." David explained that a friend of his, Caroline Shaw, owned a chain of upscale bistros in New York City. Caroline was expanding to other locations, including one slated to open in Hartford. She needed assistant managers and was willing to train them, offering competitive salaries and benefits. "I mentioned you to Caroline," David continued. "She's intrigued by your story and your dedication. She's offering you an assistant manager position, conditional on an interview and relocation if the new location isn't in your immediate vicinity." Alexis's mind reeled. A salaried job in the hospitality sector with benefits enough to provide better care for her mother, maybe move to a safer apartment, escape the financial pressure that had dogged her every step. But it also meant leaving Magnolia Diner, leaving Tanya, risking the unknown yet again. "I don't know what to say," she breathed. David gave her an encouraging nod. "Say you'll think about it, that's all. Life rarely gives you second, third, or fourth chances like this. I believe in you, Alexis." Emotions flooded her. She remembered the day she paid for the Johnson's meal, never imagining how drastically it would change her life. She looked at David's earnest face and realized that an entirely new chapter might be unfolding if she had the courage to embrace it. Despite the allure of a well-paying, stable job, Alexis found herself torn. After all, Linda was still fragile, and Alexis had established a certain routine that allowed her to juggle work, class, and hospital visits. She confided in Tanya, whose eyes widened at the mention of the assistant manager position. "Lexi, this could be huge. You've worked so hard. Why hesitate?" Margaret, however, viewed the news differently. Though she didn't say it outright, Alexis sensed her manager's resentment at potentially losing her. "Well," Margaret said tersely, "I suppose if you move on, we'll find someone else. That's the nature of the business." In her mother's room, Alexis gently approached the topic. Linda, cheeks pale but eyes lively, responded with unwavering conviction. "You have to take it, Lexi. If it provides more security, go for it. I'll be okay. But what if you need me here?" Alexis asked, tears pooling. "Then we'll work it out," Linda assured her, gripping Alexis's hand. "I'm not letting my health be an anchor that holds you back. Your father would have wanted you to seize every opportunity." The mention of her late father brought a fresh wave of emotion, but also steeled her resolve. Perhaps this job was the destiny she'd inadvertently stepped into the day she decided to help a struggling family. A week of sleepless nights followed as Alexis weighed her options. On the one hand, she had loyalty and a fear of the unknown. On the other, she had the promise of a stable career and a chance to lift herself and her mother out of perpetual hardship. One afternoon, Robert Johnson called, checking in and sharing how their family had finally caught up on bills. "Patricia and I keep telling everyone about you," he said cheerfully. "You gave us hope when we had none." His words sparked a realization in Alexis. Her single act of kindness not only helped them but also led to transformations in her own life. Perhaps the entire sequence of events was life's way of nudging her toward a bigger purpose. That evening, she called David Thompson. "I'll do the interview," she said, her voice quavering with both nerves and excitement. "Thank you for believing in me." David's voice on the other end sounded triumphant. "You won't regret this. Caroline Shaw is a brilliant restaurateur, and I have no doubt you'll impress her." They made arrangements for an interview the following week via video conference. Alexis spent the subsequent days gathering references, updating her resume, and practicing interview questions. Tanya quizzed her relentlessly, while Linda offered moral support from afar. On the day of the interview, Alexis took a half shift at the diner, then rushed home to prepare. She wore her best blouse, brushed her hair until it gleamed, and set up her laptop on the small kitchen table. Her heart thumped as she clicked the link to join the video call. Caroline Shaw appeared on screen, a poised woman in her 50s, with sharp features and keen eyes that shone with intelligence. Their conversation flowed naturally. Caroline asked about Alexis's experience, her schooling, her ambitions, and her approach to customer service. Alexis spoke candidly, drawing on her real-life lessons at Magnolia Diner, the act of kindness that fueled her journey, and her desire to grow in the hospitality industry. An hour later, Caroline smiled broadly. "I like you, Alexis Porter. You've got heart, and you've got grit. Those qualities, combined with training, can make you a fantastic manager. I'd like to offer you the position of assistant manager at my new Hartford location, opening in 3 months. In the meantime, we can have you train at one of my other spots in Stamford." Relief, awe, and excitement surged through Alexis in waves. She barely found the words to accept, tears pricking her eyes. After the call ended, she sank into her chair, breathing deeply as a sense of profound gratitude washed over her. Her phone buzzed. It was David Thompson, texting to ask how it went. She typed back, "I got the job." In a moment, his reply came, "Congratulations! The future looks bright." For the first time in her life, Alexis genuinely believed that. She thought of Robert and Patricia Johnson, Tanya, her mother Linda, and even the cynical Casey at the diner. She had weathered storms, faced robberies, battled jealousy, but her initial act of kindness, covering a family's meal, had set her on a path she never would have dreamed possible. And so, on that quiet afternoon in her modest apartment, Alexis Porter allowed herself the rare luxury of hope. She smiled at the ceiling, whispering a silent prayer of thanks for second chances, for the courage to seize them, and for the unexpected ways that kindness could rebound, changing lives far beyond its original intent. And that's how a simple act of compassion became the catalyst for an extraordinary transformation. In helping a frightened family navigate a moment of desperation, Alexis Porter discovered opportunities she never thought possible, paving her way from struggling waitress to future restaurant manager. Her journey shows us how one ripple of kindness can create far-reaching waves that alter countless lives, including our own. If this story touched your heart or inspired you to believe in the power of generosity, don't keep it to yourself. By liking, sharing, and subscribing, you help spread the message that compassion still thrives in our world. Who knows? Your small action might just spark another chain of miracles. So click that button, ring that notification bell, and join us in shining a light on stories that remind us we're all connected by hope, empathy, and possibility.